Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I'm Damon Martin.
And I'm Patrick Guerra.
And Patrick, this week we are going to take a deep dive into a horror comedy, a genre we haven't tackled a ton on the podcast over the last few years, but one that definitely qualifies with the new film Renfield in theaters. And you were freshly returned from a trip to Iceland.
Yes.
Yes. So how was Iceland? Tell our listeners how Iceland was.
Iceland is cold and rainy. It's honestly, it's the perfect place for me. Probably perfect place for a guy like Dracula. Although no, actually not, because I think the sun it's one of those places where like the sun stays up longer. Like I don't think the sun sets until like 10:30 p.m. So he probably wouldn't love it during the warmer months, but during the colder months, we got some 30 days the night shit going on over there for sure.
Interesting side note, they dropped a new trailer for the 4th season of True Detective this week, which I was very excited about. And they filmed that show entirely in Iceland. It takes place in Alaska, but they filmed it in Iceland.
I went to the spot where they were filming, where they filmed the new season of True Detective. I wish True Detective had like a very clear horror bend in it. Yeah. It kind of does. And because like I would want to talk about it on the show.
We're getting way off topic here, but I think the first season does qualify. Now the other,
it does, yeah.
The other two not so much, but the first one, man, that first season is so good. I've watched that season so many times. I can quote that show nonstop, and I think it does. I think it's so dark, and it's ritualistic murder and stuff. I think it actually does qualify. It's a pretty creepy. It's
up there.
Season.
Yeah, it's up there. I would say season 2 is the one where you're like, okay, that's not really a horror. Like you couldn't find that one to be horror at all. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, but season 3 actually really reminds me of Outsider. Yeah, like it's almost the same. It's almost Outsider without the supernatural element. Like it has all the same kind of twists and turns to it. So. Not to go on a True Detective tangent, but I mean, like, I fucking love that show. Like, I wish we could, review it on this podcast.
I've said many times that it's not easy to do horror television. Like, it's really hard to do a really good horror television show. I'm currently watching season 2 of Yellow Jackets, and that has kind of a horror tinge to it, and I really enjoyed that show. But even that's like, it's not like hardcore horror.
Yeah.
It's just, horror elements. And then you get a show like American Horror Story, which has just become a farce and a parody of itself. Did you see the casting news for that this week? Kim Kardashian is starring. I was like, I'm so glad I tuned out on this show like 3 seasons ago, because when you start casting that way, I'm like, yeah, I really have no interest in this show at this point.
American Horror Story to me is a lot like my relationship with coffee. I don't like it. People always get me to try it out, and every time I try it out, I go, "Yeah, it still sucks." I mean, like, listen, if you love American Horror Story and Ryan Murphy, like, knock yourself out. I'm not here to yuck anybody's yum. It's just not my scene. Yeah, it doesn't work for me at all. Like, it's too goofy. Like, I'm like, why is this so weird?
It became way too, like, there are good seasons. I did like certain seasons of American Horror Story, and it became a parody of itself. Like, it stopped trying to be a little scary, and now it's just a parody of a horror, show, movie, whatever you want to call it, and it's no longer interesting. It's not really funny, and it's just really just bad television, to be honest. And again, if you do like it, I'm not, you're welcome to like. There's lots of things I like that I'm sure you don't like, and that's totally cool. I'm not trying to like dig on anyone's taste in television or films, but yeah, it's just disappointing because like there's a way to, like, we're about to talk about kind of a parody of a more serious subject matter with Dracula and Renfield. With that like, there have been parodies of Dracula obviously thousands of times over, comedies involving Dracula or vampires or whatever, but typically speaking, as I said, the original Dracula novel, and then subsequent, the majority of Dracula novels or Dracula books movies and television shows typically have a more serious overtone to them, more horror. They're not typically, now again, there are plenty of comedies out there, but I would say by and large, most of them are horror / drama. And Renfield kind of twists the narrative in that, and they do it in a fun way, and we're going to get into it in a second. But I think that's where American Horror Story lost me. Is it's not funny. It's just not good.
I will say this, however, because I'm sure by now most of the people who are listening to this have probably seen Renfield. Um, it's definitely funny. I'm going to say that about it right now before spoiling anything that I feel about this movie. I laughed plenty, and I was in a crowded theater with people who were laughing. Like, it is funny. Where American Horror Story I go, are you trying to be funny? I can't. Like, what are you doing right now? This is it's like American Horror Story baffles me, and it always has. Even the early stuff, which I know gets a lot of praise from a lot of horror people, I'm still like, I don't get this.
That's tough. I think what kills me about that show is like they always have typically until now casting Kim Kardashian, which was just mind-numbingly stupid.
Well, hey,
Yeah, I mean,
stunt casting.
yeah, it's stunt casting, and her most famous film is not one that you would normally see on television unless it's something you bought off the internet. Um,
No comment.
yeah. So, how did I get? Oh, yeah. So I think that's what kills me. So to relate this back,
Well, let's go into celebrity sex tapes, Damon. Let's talk about it.
No, so what I was getting at was what kills me about that show, and then kind of leaning back to segue into what we're actually reviewing this week on Renfield. What kills me about American Horror Story is they actually have really talented people involved with those casts. Like,
Yeah,
really good cast. Sarah Paulson is great. I love Sarah Paulson.
she's very good.
Evan Peters is a really good actor. He was incredible in Mayor of Easttown. And I know he got a lot of acclaim for the Jeffrey Dahmer show. I didn't watch it. I
didn't watch
more
Dahmer.
real life, but I know he got nominated, and I think he won a Golden Globe for it, if I'm not mistaken. He's great, and a lot of the other people. Like I said, I know they had a season that
Jessica Lange was in like multiple seasons, right?
Lady Gaga, who I think is great.
I love Lady Gaga.
Like, she's really strong. And then you transition to what we talk about with Renfield. We always talk about this, Patrick. When you have a chance to do a horror movie, or in this case, a horror comedy, and you bring in well-known named actors, you're already a bit of a step ahead of some of the competition. Now, again, that's not to say you can't make a great horror film with completely no-name actors, because you absolutely can. But
horror's built on that.
Yeah, but I will say there's two things about that, though, Patrick. One thing is, yes, it will give you a bit of a leg up on the competition when you can cast really good actors like Nicholas Hoult and of course Nicolas Cage in this film. The flip of that, though, I will say this: this isn't a knock on Renfield necessarily, but something I noticed as I was taking notes, and I do take notes watching movies now. Thank you to Patrick here; he's taught me about taking notes during movies. One thing I noticed, and I was like halfway through Renfield, and I thought about this to myself: I guarantee you, I'm judging this film on a steeper curve because they have Nicholas Hoult and they have Nicolas Cage, and as director, they got a budget. I didn't notice it at first, but I noticed about halfway through the film when I'd kind of taken some criticism, and I was like, you know what? I think I'm actually judging this a little differently, because when we reviewed Last Shift, which was a couple episodes back, we did a 2-episode spin with Last Shift and Malum. They were the kind of the same film remade. Go back and listen to them. Go watch them. Last Shift was as low budget as you can get low budget horror film. Like, that's micro budget horror film. And the areas where it kind of fell short in terms of effects and maybe some performance and things like that didn't really ruin the film for me. Like, it didn't really. I actually applauded them for their creativity and how they cheated not having money, not having the budget. On the flip side, with something like Renfield, I do see myself judging it a little harsher, because I'm like, you had millions of dollars and you had a really good cast of actors and actresses in here. Like, you had a really strong cast. And when you blow it, and by the way, I'm not saying Renfield blew it. I just to get this out in front of it, I actually, for the most part, enjoyed this film. When you blow it, it feels much grander in the way you kind of blow it, if that makes sense. So I did notice that. I did notice that when I was taking notes. I was like, you know what? I think I actually am maybe being a little more judgy on this film, because you set the bar higher, because you did have the money, you did have the cast, so now you got to live up to that.
I agree with that assessment, and that, again, that's actually not a judgment directly on Renfield, but you do wonder. It's like, okay, now that you've gotten this thing greenlit, and I guarantee you the movie got made at the budget it got made at because Nicolas Cage said yes. When Nicolas Cage enters the room, enters the chat, like all bets are off. It's like, okay, well, now how big can we go? How much interest can we get? and then you get the right director. Now it's Chris McKay, right?
Yes, Chris.
Yeah, Chris McKay. I mean, he's directed some. I'm not into the Lego movies. I don't watch those. I know they're huge.
Yeah,
They have their own big fan base. They built a couple of huge names. I mean, Lord and Miller, who are pretty much, they have their own little corner of Hollywood etched out, started in the Lego movies and stuff. This is no small potatoes. So when you bring in a Chris McKay, you bring in Nicolas Cage, and then you go, hey, well, how about we bring in Nicholas Hoult too? And hey, Awkwafina's big right now. Let's bring her in. All of a sudden you're getting big. So now you're making choices you wouldn't have made as a low budget movie. You can make Renfield the same concept. You can make Renfield with no names and probably get a pretty decent movie out of it. You're not going to get the budget and the effects and the cool gore and all the stuff that you can get with the multi-millions of dollars you get when a Nicolas Cage attaches themselves to your film. But then you wonder, it's like, well, then does this thing become the victim of its own success, the victim of its own budget? Like I think Rob Zombie talked about that with The Devil's Rejects. He said that what he found with House of a Thousand Corpses was that he could constantly just throw money at the problem. It was a big studio movie. He goes, well, if there was a problem, we just threw money at it. With Devil's Rejects, he came back around with less budget, with this very constrained budget, and went, okay, I have to work my way out of this corner. And what he came out with was probably one of yours and mine favorite films of all time. 100%. Devil's Rejects is an incredible movie. It also happens to pull very closely from a movie that we both truly love, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a movie put on a very tight budget with no names and everything, and they had to make their way through that movie. They had to be have ingenuity to achieve it, and it made something truly special. You brought up Last Shift, same exact idea. They had so much money. They had this beat down police station, and that's pretty much the only location that they had, and they made tons of great use of it. So you go, well, cool. I'm glad Renfield's here, but is it a victim of its own success? We're going to find out in a few minutes here. Or truth be told, we can kind of talk a little bit about it right now. There's no secret to the plot of Renfield, right? It's Renfield himself, played by Nicholas Hoult, is Dracula's familiar, and he takes care of everything that Dracula needs, and he keeps him healthy and fed by being his day servant, his servant of the day. And he's tired. He's been doing it for a long, long time, and he's tired of this toxic relationship that he's in with Dracula. They make that very clear in the trailer, and he kind of wants out. And I realized when I was sitting there watching it about halfway through the movie, that's all you get from the trailer. And I never thought to myself, I was like, how are they going to make a whole movie out of this? Like, how does a whole movie come out of just like, oh, I'm Renfield and I'm tired of the toxic relationship I'm in with Dracula? How does that translate into 90 minutes? And I was surprised at the answer to that. Like, when it was all said and done, the big picture of the movie Renfield was way different than I ever would have thought going in. I think I was just so wrapped up in like, oh, Nicolas Cage is playing Dracula. That's fucking awesome. And it is, by the way, like super awesome. But I never thought way ahead. And this is one of those rare movies where I do enjoy watching the trailers, because the bigger movies, I don't really freak out about seeing trailers and knowing too much. Like I just buy into it. So did you have any like preconception coming in of like how the story of Renfield is going to play out?
Not particularly, only because, and again, I will say this, the trailers don't really give you a lot away in terms of what this film's actually going to be once you sit down and watch it. Now, it's well documented, Patrick. It's been well documented since we started this show. I have a kind of a love-hate relationship with horror comedies. There are great ones out there. Zombieland is one of my favorites. Mayhem, which we reviewed on the show, which cracks me up. That's a great movie.
Yeah, it's a good one.
With Steve Yeun and Samara Weaving. That's kind of a lesser known one. I would highly recommend that to people. Wolf of Snow Hollow is probably one of your and I's favorite films of the last decade, maybe.
Easily.
Werewolves Within is a great example of horror comedy that works really
fantastic,
hilarious and funny, and still got some great horror in there. So there's elements of it. So yeah, I would say watching the trailers, I had kind of an idea of what Renfield would be. The toxic relationship, this weird codependency between Renfield and Dracula. And yeah, I was kind of with you, like, how is this going to transform? And I had an idea how I thought the film was going to play out. And it played out in a completely different way than I expected. Is that still a major part of the film, the whole toxic relationship? Yeah, that's very much the center of the film. They didn't fool you with that. It's the other stuff that's in there, and I will say, and I'll get a lot more into this when we get into spoilers. There's a review out there, and I wish I could give credit. I didn't look it up before the show today, but there was a review I read after I saw Renfield a day ago, and I was like, I enjoyed myself, but I didn't love it. And I was trying to figure out why. And even though it took notes and I left the video, I was like, I can't quite put my finger on what it is that I didn't love about this movie. I liked it. It was fun. It was goofy. It was funny. And by the way, credit to Chris McKay and also Universal. It's R-rated. It's gory as hell.
Oh, yeah.
It is way gorier than I expected it to be. I thought it was going to be way toned down. It was not toned down. Bravo on the gore, man. They went way over the top with that. And I did not see that coming. I thought it was going to be like, a little toned down. Not at all, man. There's some
it's hard R.
Yeah, hard R. A review said it's a fun, goofy movie with a plot that gets in the way. Now, it's been well documented throughout, as I talk about horror comedies on the show, I am the story guy. I'm a writer by trade. Narrative matters to me. That's why a lot of like A24 and certain films like that, I flip out about, because when it's just this weird, bizarre twists and turns, and it's like, you're not really supposed to know what's going on. Very art house kind of feel. Again, we've talked about this many times on the show. You're more of the art house guy than I am. I am a story guy. I need a story. I like a good story. And when I read that review and it said the plot gets in the way of this movie just being goofy and fun and kind of a gory night at the movies, I was like, you know what? That's pretty dead on, because the story, which they don't spoil for you in the trailers, they really don't.
Yeah.
That's probably the part of the film that I dislike the most. But the gore, the comedy, the performances, those were all great. I enjoyed that. But when I was over the bed, I was like, now I get it. Like, I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it because the plot of the movie, and I know we can't get into spoilers yet. We're going to get there in just a minute. The plot gets in the way of this being just a really fun, goofy horror comedy, in my opinion.
I think it would take balls at the level that is Universal, right? This major, one of the 3 top players in the entire industry. It would take balls for them to actually approach this the way you approach a lower budget horror movie, which is like, let us live on the premise that Renfield and Dracula are in a toxic relationship. Like, let the trailer, what's proposed to us in the trailer, actually live and be the meat of the story. It would take some, configuration. It would take some figuring out, but basically, like, shrink the world down to Renfield and Dracula and maybe that third person, in this case Awkwafina, which is she's highlighted in the trailer, so I'm not spoiling anything there. Find a way to make that little devil's 3-way an interesting horror movie on a very, like, intimate scale. Because what you had there, the dynamic between those 3 is very interesting and very funny, and you can kind of pick it up in the trailer. It's in there. It's delivered in the movie. It's very much there. But there's a lot of other stuff that does not come out in the trailer at all, that you're like, whoa, okay, there's a lot more to this than I thought there was, and maybe there's too much to this movie, because I was having a lot of fun watching Renfield and Dracula interact. You do get Nicolas Cage. No spoiler here. You get Nicolas Cage as Dracula, and he's Nicolas Cage as Dracula. It's what you wanted, and you get it. Maybe my biggest complaint, maybe you don't get it enough. I kind of wanted way more of it, but I don't know how that would have went. Like, I don't know if necessarily, like, I want to catch up to that car as I chase it. But I liked what Nicolas Cage was doing with Dracula. Like, I'm here to tell you that. And I like Awkwafina. Actually, I actually enjoy her, what she adds to movies. Yeah, I never thought I'd say that necessarily, knowing like she was like a YouTube rapper or something back in the day. As a character in movies, I think she does pretty well, and she's actually enjoyable. And Nicholas Hoult is, no offense, Nicholas Hoult, but you're just like, you're reliable, pal. Like, I know when Nicholas Holt's in my movie, like he's gonna deliver. He's like he's like a Josh, was it Josh Hartnett that I'm thinking of?
Yeah.
Like another guy, which is like, well, he's in the movie, he's gonna go right down the middle of the line. The Timothy Oliphants, the Josh Hartnetts, the Nicholas Holt's, like you get what you pay for with those guys, and that's a talent all in itself. They're not like Nicolas Cage, this hot ball of lightning that is zapping around the screen. They're there to sort of anchor the thing. So you have those three forces, and they're all working in very different elements. And I like that. And I wish that maybe the movie was smaller and more intimate and kind of focused on those three very different types. Instead, when we get into spoilers, we're talking about a pretty large scale movie, something on the order of, like, I don't want to say Fast and the Furious. That's maybe too big, because Fast and Furious is like car versus submarine in a frozen lake and in the middle of by the way, I think they filmed that in Iceland as well. It's not that. It's not a crazy huge.
Are you saying Renfield is all about family? Is that what you're saying?
Renfield's all about family, basically toxic family. But it's a bigger. It's kind of like, I don't know. Would you categorize this as an action movie?
It is, and I think, again, it sounds like this is a major complaint. It feels like, and I want to make it clear, this isn't really, because when you get those moments with Nicholas Hoult and Nicolas Cage together, they're fun.
Yeah.
They bounce off each other really well. There's great chemistry there. And Nicholas Hoult and Awkwafina also have really good chemistry in this movie, really well done. I'm not as familiar with Awkwafina outside of like Shang-Chi and a couple other movies she's done.
Yeah.
But she was fun. And the interaction specifically with Nicholas Hoult and Nicolas Cage was great. And also the interactions with Nicolas Hoult at his support group, which you do see in the trailer. So again, no spoiler there. Those are fun. Those are really good, and like those, I don't know. There's something about a support group in a film that, like, sometimes they pull it off and it's great, especially in a comedy when you can do it well. Those scenes are tremendous, and I really enjoy those scenes, and what they play for you in the trailer kind of amped up and extended in the film, and it works really well and really funny and great stuff. But when they start adding in all the other stuff, it just feels like, I guess my biggest, when I left the theater and I kind of figured out why I didn't love this film, but I did like it, is I said, why? It just felt unnecessary. Like, some of those parts felt unnecessary. Again, there's a lot to like about this movie. The gore is great. The comedy is over the top. I cracked up several times in this film. I was laughing out loud in the theater several times in this film. And as you said, Nicolas Cage, brilliant. I am a big Nicolas Cage guy. I think what he's done in recent years, I mean, I know you and I both love Pig. Nicolas Cage named that as his favorite film he's ever done. I don't know if you saw that interview with him. But
he did say that Pig was his top movie?
Pig was his favorite film he's ever done. And
I rest my case.
And I was like,
Nicolas Cage agrees.
Yep. I was like, you know what? You're not wrong, Nicolas Cage. I love Pig. I love what he's done recently. He's taken chances, and does everything work? No. But is it fun to watch Nicolas Cage go completely unhinged sometimes? Absolutely. And I really enjoy this current version of Nicolas Cage we're getting. And in a weird way, I think like he almost tones it down a little bit for Dracula, but not in a bad way. Like, I thought he was going to be way more over the top. He wasn't. He was actually a little more subdued, but it was still great. And it was it was just deliciously funny and vicious at moments. And you know what? One thing I really enjoyed about his portrayal of Dracula was there's a couple of good moments, not throughout, because it's a comedy. There's a couple of good moments where he really does pull off the intimidating factor, where I'm like, damn, like, you can see where he pulls off the Dracula role, where if they decided to do a full like drama version of this, just a full on horror film like this, he could pull off that Dracula too and be pretty scary. So overall, like I said, performance is great, interaction was great, chemistry was great, but then they injected this other part. I feel like we got to get into spoilers here, Patrick.
Oh, yeah.
So as we said, if you haven't seen Renfield, it's in theaters now. Go check it out. If you have seen it or you just don't care, we're going to get into spoilers right now. And when I talked about the plot gets in the way of this film, Patrick, because the one part, again, the trailer gave really no hint of this, is this weird underlying story involving Aquafina's character as a New Orleans police officer and this crime family called the Lobos, who apparently run the underworld in New Orleans, and they own the cops and they own the streets, and it's almost like a Naked Gun kind of operation, like funny, goofy, like kind of stupid, but yet somehow they're completely in power. And that ends up being a huge part of the movie. Aquafina's character in particular, because her father was apparently murdered by the Lobo family. And as I'm watching this and as I left the theater, I'm like, what? It's not that I don't care about Aquafina's character. But she's not the lead.
Yeah.
But they tried to shoehorn a storyline in to make it the lead. And I was like, why is
they
this?
Give her the lead storyline,
yeah.
is what they do. No, I continue. Sorry, I thought I cut you off.
It takes away from the good part of the movie, which is the relationship between Dracula and Renfield, and they have the best moments. Now, Aquafina's performance is great. She had good chemistry. I don't mind her being there, but the storyline connecting her and then introducing this big crime family just felt unnecessary.
There is just so much happening in this movie. I mean, so you have obviously, the movie kicks off with this really great thing that I loved, which is Nicholas Hoult sort of talking about Nicholas Hoult playing Renfield, talking about the origins of his relationship with himself and Dracula, and they even do these great like old Universal Dracula pictures with Nick Cage, like, you know, put into the role of Dracula, like the classic old
Bela
school
Lugosi.
The old Bela Lugosi, but it's Nicolas Cage, and like in all those great moments, like I was like, oh, that's funny and fun. It's like really silly, but it really works. And then it goes right into the support group thing, and you go, okay, cool. So okay, we're living in that world. We're doing that thing. And you learn right off the top that Nicholas Holt's kind of like over it. Like he's done dealing with Dracula, who is this hardcore narcissist. And it makes total sense. Like when you just on its head, what Dracula is, and as a character throughout literary and film history, he is a narcissist. He is fully consumed with himself and the things that he wants, and basically makes life a living hell for anyone in his orbit. And so it makes sense why Renfield's there. You're like buying into everything, and you're like, okay, all of this is working. It's all making sense. And then he bumps into Aquafina's character, who's Rebecca. She's an officer, you mentioned. Her father was sort of a star policeman on the force, and he was killed by the Lobo family. And you're like, okay, cool. That's a lot of story. That's a lot of story for like a B character. There's even more story. Her sister is an FBI agent, also working on the case to take down the Lobos. And I'm like, well, now we're in a cop movie where two sisters are trying to avenge their father, who was taken out by the Lobos, and they're trying to discover that. And then there's an additional story, which is the Lobos themselves, who I had no idea Ben Schwartz was in this movie, based on the trailer. No idea. Ben Schwartz plays Teddy Lobo, the son of Bella Francesca Lobo, she's the matriarch of the Lobo clan, and her son Teddy is sort of he doesn't have the teeth to take over the family, and she wants to make sure he does have the teeth to take over the family. If this sounds like we're getting way off the Renfield Dracula course, it's because we are. This movie really dives into this whole like Lobo, Rebecca saga. Like it becomes there's like a cop saga also like injected into this Renfield movie. And I was like, well, there's no wonder you didn't put any of this in the trailer. It's got nothing to do with those two.
Yeah, it's a weird direction, and it's like I said, it's the only thing that really takes away from this being a really like just a knockdown, drag out, funny film. Funny horror comedy, because they kept injecting this, and they're like literally beating you over the head with it numerous times in the film, and there's moments and there's sections of this movie where you're kind of like, is this still Renfield? Is this still the Renfield movie I signed up to see? Because I'm spending an awful lot of time with Aquafina and the New Orleans Police Department investing in this crime family. which has nothing to do with Dracula and nothing to do with Renfield. I don't want to do a full-on rewrite of Living Dead, but this popped in my head, Patrick. You know, all they had to do, you know, the whole idea of Renfield is that he says his life has become a cycle where they move to a new place, Dracula wreaks havoc. Eventually, some, you know, townspeople or whatever, they rise up against him. He almost gets killed. Renfield saves his life, and then they have to move on. He has to nurse him back to health, and the whole cycle starts over again. And I was thinking to myself, well, if they've been to New Orleans for a lot of years, why didn't they? If they wanted to inject the Aquafina and her dad storyline, why didn't they just make it that Dracula killed her dad?
Right.
Then Aquafina has a reason to want to kill Dracula, and then there's like that weird tension with her and Renfield because, you know, he finds out that Dracula killed her father. I know that sounds very basic, but like that would have connected those characters together in a better way, and also maybe even a big reveal like, oh, that's how he died. It wasn't, you know, he got killed in the job. He got killed by Dracula. You know, maybe she taught you like Dracula tosses her his badge that he stole when he killed him or whatever. That connects those characters. The Lobo storyline is just so weird and just it just again it feels like two halves of the movie. Now they do eventually come together at the end, but even that it's kind of like why? Like it just felt weird. And here's one thing I always, and I know this is a big one of the this is so going kind of off subject, but you'll see where I'm going here. Dracula is an all-powerful killing machine creature, right? At night. Obviously, we know his weaknesses during the day. And every variation of the character throughout history has some sort of guardians of the day, which is what Renfield is supposed to be for him. But at night, Dracula's all-powerful. You cannot fuck with this guy, right? Okay. It reminds me of Superman because every time, and to be fair, there's a show on the CW right now called Superman and Lois. I actually really enjoy it. It's actually a really fun show. I'm a guilty pleasure show. I really enjoy that show. But it still bugs me that almost every single episode that Superman gets into a fight, he has to have somebody else save him.
That's how you have that's how you have a Superman TV show, by the way.
And I'm like, I understand, but I'm like, it's Superman. Like that's part of the problem of Superman is he's so powerful that you've kind of written yourself into a corner to where you need another Superman-like character to really fight him because anyone else is not going to oppose him. That's The Boys, which is a brilliant TV show, probably one of my favorites on television. Homelander is a version of Superman, right? Like he's basically Superman. And part of the terrifying part about Homelander through 3 seasons of The Boys is that he is that. You can't stop him. You can't beat him. He is unbeatable. You know what I mean? Like like when they finally did get like, not to give boy spoilers, but like the only way they've actually been able to hurt him was to find people who are as equally powerful as him. It's not like, oh, we have kryptonite and like so. Getting back to Renfield, they introduced the Lobo clan, and at the end of the movie, the entire idea is it's almost like do you remember Castlevania, the game?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Dracula was the big bad, but then you had to go through all his minions and everything to get to Dracula at the end of the game. It felt like that in the movie. Like they had the Lobo clan working for Dracula, and they were the obstacle for Renfield to fight to get to Dracula. I'm like, hold on now. Isn't Dracula like all powerful and complete badass and totally, you know, all these things that he needs a weird army of street thugs to fight for him? It just, I don't know. It bugged me because it reminded me of the Superman thing where I'm like, if Superman's Superman, does he really need like a bunch of other people to constantly save him? Is that what we're saying about Dracula? Like he's really not that powerful?
Well, and to tie in your boys thing, you know, like I can see why that frustrates you that Superman and Lois is like, why is Superman getting beat every episode? Well, because every episode of TV, the rule with writing a good TV episode is that you actually don't solve the problem. You might solve the problem of the day, but you don't solve the greater problem. Otherwise, you don't have a TV show. You actually have to keep the problem going. So The Boys is the genius because it's the inverse of it. It's like the problem is the all-powerful being. The problem is this being no one can stop. So we'll always have a problem at the end of every episode, no matter what we solve, because at the end of every episode, Homelander is still all powerful. We can't beat him. So that's going to be a problem throughout the entire series. That's a great way to make that thing go. Now you flip over here to Renfield, and Dracula is the all-powerful being. As far as I can tell, there's like 2 daylight moments ever in this like movie. It's almost all takes place at night. Now they do smartly at first is that you get Dracula he's weakened, right? The last time he'd been you know, attacked by a mob, they almost got him, and so he was like almost burned to a crisp. And so Renfield is kind of helping him get back to his strength. Renfield does that nowadays by going after shitheads. Like he's sort of become a little bit of an anti-hero. He goes to the support group and looks for the toxic relationship person, and he preys upon them. The problem is that blood is not pure enough, and that blood doesn't make Dracula strong enough. So he gets frustrated with Renfield and is like, hey, you need to give me like innocent people, like a bunch of nuns or a bus full of cheerleaders. You see that in the trailer. That kind of blood is what actually makes Dracula strong. And so he's kind of after that, and he's getting on Renfield about it. And so as he gets stronger through all this like bad guy blood, but it's not getting strong enough, eventually he bumps into Teddy, who's going after Renfield. And if I'm starting to feel exhausted, there's way too many elements going on in this movie. And we've talked about that with all types of movies at all different levels. So this is not even a knock on like bigger budget movies. This is just one of those movies. A great horror movie is kind of like straightforward, simple idea. There's so much to this movie. There's so much going on because at some point, Dracula sees Teddy Lobo as he's evil enough to be like, maybe I use him to help me get my power back. But I don't even remember him necessarily doing that.
Yeah.
Like he just sort of makes Teddy one of his familiars, and then all his little Lobo underlings become familiars. And just like you said, they become the blockade against Dracula, who at this point already seems very strong. Because I think at that point he had eaten everybody at the support group who are innocent people, so he gained his powers. So why did we even need Teddy in there?
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. Like,
yeah,
it felt very much like why does Superman need minions to save him? He's freaking Superman.
Yeah. So all these exhausting elements come out, and it takes away from the hook. The hook in that trailer that the only trailer that I ever saw, I never saw the one that you played at the intro of this podcast, but the one that was out there in pretty much every, TV and movie thing. I was hooked on that idea, on the idea that Renfield was trying to shake Dracula and he couldn't shake him. This movie is like, boy, oh boy, with the amount of people and plots and ideas that need to be like figured out. At one point, by the way, Dracula kidnaps Rebecca's sister, the FBI agent, and uses her as bait to bring Rebecca in. And I believe he kills her, if I'm not mistaken, and says, if you want her back, you have to join me. I can bring her back to life with my Dracula blood. Did we ever get her back?
Yeah, she comes back.
She does. Okay.
Yeah, they capture it and they use the blood to bring her back, and they also
so they did use
they bring back the entire support group too.
Right? Yeah, they do all that. It's a lot of shit.
But here's the thing: the support group stuff is great, funny.
Yes.
The leader of the support group, I'm blanking on the actor,
Brandon Scott Jones, who plays Mark.
Brandon Scott Jones, fantastic, and I know we're going to get into the best performance here in a second. Unbelievably, just fantastic. I loved him. He was hilarious. He has that great moment in the trailer where he's like, you know what'll happen? He won't go to full power. Yes, he won't go to full power. Wow, that's so weird. You say it like that, but yeah, hilarious.
He's really good.
The entire support group stuff, and again, the angle of the toxic relationship stuff works great. It's actually real. There's a great.
It really does work.
The apartment was so. Eventually, Renfield moves out into his own apartment and starts his own life. It's a really funny montage where he puts his life together. It's very like, feels very much like Spider-Man 2 when they had that whole scene with Peter Parker walking around with the sun, the raindrops keep falling on my head. It felt like that. Like he's putting his life together. He's moving into an apartment. He's buying clothes at Old Navy and like he went to Macy's. And I'm like, this is really funny. And then he comes home one day and he has a welcome mat that says "Welcome all, one and all" or something like that. And Dracula was able to get into his apartment. And said, "Welcome."
It's such a funny gag.
Which is a hilarious twist, by the way.
Yeah.
And they have a great interaction in there where basically Nicolas Cage and Dracula is confronting Renfield, who has kind of abandoned him at this point, but never told him about it. He just left. And
Right.
so he's like confronting him about it. It's hilarious. It's a great scene between those two. And I was just like, give me more of that. Less of this weird Lobo dead father plot line that really just took away from the fun parts of this film.
All the Rebecca dead dad cop Lobo plot line was for some sort of serious movie.
Yeah.
This is not a serious movie. We bought into a comedic movie.
Now, I will say though, not to cut you, I will say Ben Schwartz is pretty hilarious. Teddy is.
Oh yeah.
But it was, as I said earlier, it was like a Naked Gun, like goofy crime guy, and there's no universe where you would believe this is a serious crime family that they're trying to sell you as, because they are full on Naked Gun, spoofy, dumb
buffoons.
Yeah, like really dumb buffoon crime family. Like no one in their right mind would believe these people could actually run a city.
Yeah. It's just that whole plot, the whole cop saga plot is for a straightforward crime drama. Like, just go make a crime drama about Rebecca, her sister, the FBI agent, and the Lobos. Like, just go make a crime drama. I'll go watch that. Something serious and something hardcore, and put it over there somewhere. And don't include Dracula in that. Just go off and do that somewhere. Oh. Be funny. Just have this funny, interesting plot, because you did mention the toxic relationship stuff between Renfield and Dracula is very well crafted in this movie. It's very well put together, very clear. So I really think it should have just been kind of this three-way between Renfield, Rebecca, and Dracula, and like Rebecca would have been like his chance at a normal life, and Dracula's constantly pulling him back in.
Yeah.
With that toxic relationship that they've always had. Like, just play on that. And the funny bits of this movie are funny. If you want to go to Renfield to laugh, you're going to go to laugh. Like don't take how we criticize this movie with like, oh, I guess Renfield wasn't funny. It was funny. It was just like, at some point you're just like, this is funny, but what the hell kind of movie is this?
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know what movie I'm really watching.
It just felt like they got pulled into too many directions. The parts that were good were really good, and then the parts that weren't, it wasn't even that they weren't good. It was just like, why is this here?
It's just too much. It wasn't. No. Yeah, you're right. It wasn't that it was bad. It was just like, I think this is too many things.
Yeah, it would be like watching, like The Sopranos or Breaking Bad or something, and then they just inject a weird, like, new character that doesn't have any purpose of being there, and they suddenly are talking about some of their storyline that has no relevant point to building a meth kingdom or being a mobster in New Jersey. You're like, why is this in here?
You know what it would remind me of? If Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul were all taking place at the exact same time.
Yeah.
Like, I like both things. But if you put them all in the same show or all in the same movie, like, let's just pretend Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul were just one movie, it'd be too much. Yeah. You'd be like, oh, cool. Okay, so Heisenberg and Jesse, and then there's also Slip and Jimmy, but he's got a thing with his brother, and then his girlfriend who's going to be his wife. You'd be like, there's just too much stuff going on.
Yeah,
like, these are two different things. Put them aside. Make them two different things.
Yeah,
it's just a lot of shit.
Yeah, it's a lot. And again, the parts that were fun were great, and it's really funny. And again, if you weirdly just take out that other section, it would be like an hour-long movie, but it would be great. Like the whole toxic relationship, codependency, and the support group stuff was hilarious and fun and really well done. And I didn't need the Lobo family. I did that part. And don't get me wrong, there were some funny parts. Ben Schwartz is really funny in this movie.
And all that also lends itself to a lot of the gore and the kills and all that stuff.
And that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. But again, the actual plot line, as I said, it's a movie that's goofy and fun with a plot that gets in the way. And that's really the best way I could describe this movie. With that being said, Patrick, let's get into our categories. We do have quite a few to get through. Now, I'm going to mention one that you didn't put on the list here.
Oh,
I'm telling you now, so you can think about it, and we'll talk about the end. Are you ready?
okay.
What is your favorite on-screen Dracula?
Yeah. I'll have to
Think
think
about
about
that.
that one.
Think
Yeah.
about that. We'll come back to
Dracula. We're talking
Dracula,
about
not
Dracula
vampire.
himself.
Yeah, Dracula himself.
Mm-hmm.
Favorite on-screen portrayal of Dracula. We'll come back to that at the end. This is totally what I'm throwing at you without any preparation. I just had this thought. I was like, ooh, that would be fun. So think about that as we go through the categories. So, kicking things off, best performance. We've already been kind of talking about it, so I'll let you kick things off with your best performance in Renfield.
My best performance went to Ben Schwartz as Teddy Lobo. Yes, the side character, the side plot that didn't need to be there was damn good. Now, mind you, this is a movie with Nicolas Hoult, tried and true, Awkwafina, great supporting comedic character, and fucking Nicolas Cage playing Dracula. You'd think one of those three would have got my best performance. I'll tell you why Ben Schwartz got my performance. Not only was he funny, so he adds himself to that element of the movie, which is, I think, the critical thing that actually drew me in was this funny idea of Dracula. But it was a different Ben Schwartz than I'm used to. Everybody knows Ben Schwartz famously from Parks and Recreation. He played John Ralphio, this really wacky, over-the-top character. In this one, he's a little bit more, I would say, in that weird cop drama movie where he plays the son of the head of a crime family, who's kind of a shithead and kind of not capable of doing what he's doing. Like, he totally worked in a weird way, in a weird, like, it wasn't, I wouldn't call it a dramatic role, but I would say, like, he played some tonal nuances in there that I didn't know Ben Schwartz had. And so I was like, well, look at this guy. Like, he's like, Nicolas Cage gave me what I knew he was going to give me. Awkwafina gave me what I knew she was going to give me. Same with Nicolas Hoult, tried and true. Sorry, Nicolas Hoult, for being so damn reliable. I didn't know Ben Schwartz could kind of give me the levels, and he gave me the levels. Now, when he became sinister Teddy Lobo, okay, not quite, but also, like, we just didn't need that whole plot. But I was impressed with him. I was impressed with how well he was able to entertain with the other characters that were in this movie. Like, he kind of shined.
So, in my own defense, I didn't watch Parks and Rec, but I know who Ben Schwartz is. I know who he is. I've seen him in other things. I knew who he was. When the film was over and they were doing the cast, because I didn't look. I knew the main cast, but I didn't look up all the supporting characters. So I wanted to go in as fresh as I could to the movie. I saw the cast list. I saw Ben Schwartz. I was like, that was Ben Schwartz. He looked so different. I didn't even recognize him in that film. Now, again, I don't know Parks and Rec. If I'd seen that show, I'm quite sure I would have recognized him, but I know who he is. And when the movie was over, I was like, that was Ben Schwartz?
Yeah.
So, yeah, he really pulled off. And again, he's naked gun goofy funny. He is the least reliable gangster in the history of least reliable gangsters. He is full on Lieutenant Frank Drebin, except he is a criminal in this world. He is, like, there's a really funny part. He gets arrested early in the movie after throwing cocaine at some cops, which is a really funny part as well.
Very funny.
And they put him in an interrogation room, and Awkwafina and her partner are standing outside, and he's confessing to everything. He's, like, telling them everything he's ever done. And they're like, why is he confessing? We haven't even asked him a question yet. He's just confessing, trying to confess to everything he's ever done.
Freaked the fuck out.
Yeah, it's hilarious. It's a really fun. So, like, he's really funny, and I didn't recognize him. I was like, oh my God, that's Ben Schwartz. So that to me is the sign of a good performance, when you can melt yourself into a role like that. And I was like, I didn't know it was him. So my best performance, listen, Nicolas Hoult, as you said, he's like a Jeep. He's reliable. He's like
don't do that. He's like a Toyota 4Runner. Jeeps are not as reliable.
Okay, he's like a Toyota. He's like a Toyota Corolla. Like, it's not the fanciest car. It's not the fanciest car, but it's going to get you to where you're going. It's going to run for 200,000 miles, right?
Going to get you home too.
You are not going to go Fast and Furious off the starting line. You are not going to. There is no woman in the world who's going to look at you sitting in that car and say, "Man, I really want to sit in that guy's Corolla." No, none of that's going to happen. Okay, but it's going to get you from point A to point B, and it's reliable. That's
Point A.
Nicholas Hoult. So he is, as described, very reliable in this film. Aquafina, very funny, and of course, Nicolas Cage is brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant, and I loved him in this role. Give me more. Again, as you said, the one thing I would have criticism here. Give me more Nicolas Cage. I wish we had more. But I'm gonna go a little different route on my best performance. You're gonna enjoy this one because it's a very minor role in this film. But I want to give a shout out because when I recognized who it was, I was like, oh, I know her, and she was really good. And she's only in the movie for about 10 minutes. Her name is Jenna Cannell.
Mm-hmm.
And she plays one of the support group people who constantly tries to share her story, and she's always being interrupted by Renfield. And at one point, Renfield bursts in the door right before Dracula shows up. She's like, will I ever get to finish my fucking story?
She had one of the funniest lines in the movie. She goes, what did she go? Oh, fuck, I wrote it down here. She said it. Oh, it's so fucking funny. Like she's telling her story, and then Renfield comes in, as he does, because that's the gag, and interrupts her, and then she just basically says, well, fuck Carol, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Fuck Carol, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, and I totally knew it's Jenna Cannell from Terrifier, from the first Terrifier.
And she is in Terrifier 2, but in a very small role, but she is the star.
Yeah, she's the star of Terrifier.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's Jenna Cannell, and only the hardcores know that that's Jenna Cannell on screen.
Yeah, but she was fantastic, and she had me laughing, and I was like, what a great performance. I was like, that when you said, well, fuck Carol, and then the second time when he burst, he's like, I guess I never get to finish a fucking story. It was really good. Like, she was really funny.
Yeah.
I will say, again, it's funny, we both skipped over the main performers in this thing, but I also would say Brandon Scott Jones, as the group leader, he is really.
Oh yeah.
And that line from the trailer that when you see it, the one thing I say I have an issue with trailers is when you give away too much, and I'm always scared. I'm always scared with comedies when they put a lot of jokes in the trailers. I'm like, oh, because I've seen comedies in theaters where I'm like, you put all the funny parts in the trailer. There's nothing else in the film. That line that they deliver in the trailer that I mentioned, like, wow, why would you paint it that way? It plays in the movie and it's still just as hilarious. Like,
still good.
It does the trailer used it, but it was still really funny in the movie. So I'll go. I know I'm cheating here, but Jenna Cannell and Brandon Scott Jones, they were fantastic. The support group scenes were the best in the whole film.
It was. I'm telling you, the version of the movie where they lean heavily on that support group could be kind of the core ensemble cast. Add in Rebecca. Maybe just make her a cop that's in the support group. She doesn't have to. Yeah. She can still be a cop, and then you know what I mean. And then I'm telling you, like they had the thing. They just went too big with it.
Yeah. But it was, like I said, the supporting characters were great in this film.
Yeah, they were great.
And
they shined.
And the other people, as we've said numerous times, were great. It's just I want to shine a light. I thought Jenna Cannell did a fantastic job, and also Brandon Scott Jones. The support groups, I loved those scenes. Those were the best scenes. Fuck Carol.
Fuck Carol, I guess. I laughed so hard, and like I knew that I was in that group. If I guarantee you, in that theater, it might have been me and maybe one other person. Were like, that's Jenna Cannell from fucking Terrifier. I guarantee you, there's very few people who have seen Terrifier.
Yeah,
it's only the dirtiest and nastiest of us, and so it was great to see her on screen. It was that extra horror guy bonus.
Yeah, I was very happy. And also this is a big production. Like, this is a big deal.
Yeah, I'm happy for Jenna.
Yeah, very, very cool. Let's talk about favorite character, because there are a lot of characters in this film. And good ones at that, by the way. I mean, like I said, even though I thought the Lobo thing was kind of dumb, the Teddy Lobo character was rather hilarious. So what was your favorite character in Renfield?
Tons to choose from. There's actually a ton of great characters to choose from. I went with Officer Chris, played by Adrian Martinez. Now he's actually got one of the smallest roles in the movie. It's no small part. It ties into everything really well because he plays Rebecca's partner at the police on the police squad. Adrian Martinez is just one of these incredibly funny. He's naturally a very funny character actor. He's in a lot of movies and he plays a lot of little roles in all these small movies. He always just delivers on that level. You talk about the moment where where Teddy throws cocaine at the cops. He smacks Chris right in the face with a big bag of cocaine, and it's just fucking funny. Like, it's, again, you're gonna laugh at this movie, and it's all these little parts that add up. And I wanted to give a shout out to Adrian Martinez and his character of Chris, because he is one of those things where it's like, it's just enough of an accent to keep things fun and funny the whole time. And I just think he shines. He's one of those guys that just shines as a great character actor, and that perfect supporting role of Chris.
To quote another great, one of my favorite film podcasts, The Rewatchables, he's a great that guy. Like, you know him, but
Totally.
you don't know him. Like, you know him, but you're like, where do I know that guy from? He's a that guy. He's very much a that guy. So here's where I cheated. So my best performance, I want to give it to a couple of the side characters a couple of the supporting characters who did a fantastic job. My favorite character in this film was Dracula himself, Nicolas Cage. He was so good, and I'll be honest, like, there's a million versions of Dracula out there, and I hit you with the category we're gonna do at the end, our favorite on-screen portrayal of Dracula. I really like. I'm a big fan of the Hammer horror films with Christopher Lee. I think he is fantastic. Probably one of the more terrifying versions of that character. I'll be honest, I'm not as familiar. I've seen the Bela Lugosi Dracula. I'm not saying it's not good, but I'm not one of those people that falls over backwards. I'm not saying it's not good. I'm just saying, like, it's not of my era.
Yeah.
Granted, the movie came out like 1934, so it's not a lot of people's era at this point.
Most people whose that era was are dead.
Yeah, but I understand the brilliance of the performance, but it's just not, it's not my thing, right? And same with Nosferatu. Like, I get what Max Schreck, he praised left, right, and center. I get it. But again, I admit, like, maybe I'm a little biased just because, like I said, I grew up, my early films were 70s films. Like, I love Jaws and things like that, The Exorcist, but before that, it really, to me, feels totally dated, and I just don't get into it as much. I'm not saying they're not good. I'm just saying, for me personally, not my cup of tea most of the time. Nicolas Cage combined elements of every Dracula you've ever loved. He was funny. He was goofy, but he was also a little terrifying in moments. Like, there were some legit moments where I'm like, oh, this is a scary bastard. He was great. And like I said, my only real complaint is I wish we got him more. Give me like 20 minutes more of Nicolas Cage's Dracula and 20 minutes less of the weird Lobo crime saga.
I'm telling you right now, and now I've learned in the tiny bit of research that I did, that Nicolas Cage has been he's been tapped to play Dracula multiple times. Actually, this is not the only time he's ever sniffed the idea of playing Dracula. This is just the first time he actually got to do it. If you just took the comedic tone and dialed it down, I don't know, 4 notches, he's got a really terrifying Dracula.
Oh yeah,
like a good one, a really good one. And there you just get a hint of it in the trailer when he's kind of going, you know, it was something to the effect of, some call me the Dark One, you know, the Lord of Death. Yeah, and I was like it's kind of scary. Like, and he looks kind of scary, you know, the design of him is scary. And I think he inhabits the role really well. And I think if there was tonally a dark, like, say, the director of Pig, who I will go see anything that guy makes for the rest of his life. If the director of Pig wanted to make his Dracula and you brought in Nicolas Cage, like, it would be something for the ages. Like Nick Cage tapped into something, but this is a funny movie. So I think ultimately he leaned on the funny as well, and it works. But I was like, shit, dude, if he wanted to play a serious Dracula, it would be great.
There's a great scene early in the movie after he goes through, he almost gets cooked alive by the sunlight. And so Renfield is trying to nurse him back to health. And he goes back to their lair underneath a hospital in New Orleans. And there's a really creepy version of Dracula where he's all beat up and looks all like mutilated. Looks a lot, it looks a lot like Bill Paxton in Near Dark when they have the whole sunlight thing, when he looks all mangled and burnt up and kind of gross. There's a version, and like when they showed him kind of lurking out of the shadows, I was like, oh shit, like it was kind of scary. I was like, damn, like that was a really good moment. Like he looked creepy as hell. I just loved it. I loved the performance, but also I loved the character. Like the character was great. And again, as you said, if you dial it a different direction, this could be a really scary Dracula, but for the one they made, for the funny, goofy, but also kind of terrifying Dracula, works well. Nicolas Cage is a stroke of genius to cast that guy in this role, and he eats it up, man. He really does. He eats up every scene he is in, he is brilliant. And I love the performance, but I love the character, because again, there's a million versions of Dracula out there, and Nicolas Cage made this one his own.
Yeah, it does sort of make me sad because I'm like, well, we're probably never going to get the serious Dracula from Nicolas Cage because we just did it.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're going to get a serious one. But like that same premise of like him and Renfield living underground in an abandoned hospital, and he's like half fucking fucked up. Like that would be a killer serious Dracula movie.
Yeah, you could make this like you could do a Renfield part 2, but make it all drama and make it all horror, and it would be terrifying.
Universal, grow a sack and do it. Yeah. It would be so fucking good.
Yeah, let's talk about best gore, because I guess probably my biggest surprise about this film was the gore, and I don't know, maybe it's a weird thing with me and horror comedies. Like again, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with them. I love certain ones, Shaun of the Dead, Zombieland. Go on. We already named some earlier in the show.
Yeah, by the way, both have a lot of gore.
Yeah, exactly. But I was like, I went in kind of thinking this is, and it's not that I wasn't like trying to prejudge the movie, but it's a Universal film. I kind of forgot it was R-rated, to be honest, and I was like,
yeah,
I feel
me
like
too.
It's going to be a little toned down, and that's fine. I don't need it to be like way over the top and gory. It is way over the top and gory. I was like, damn, this is a super gory film. So, what was your favorite gore in Renfield?
Yeah. So at some point, oh gosh, I don't remember why. There are a lot of different action set pieces in this movie, and at one point, I think I want to say it's Dracula who rips the face off a SWAT team.
No, it's Renfield who does.
It is Renfield then. Okay, yeah, okay, yeah. Again, there's a lot of different. Forgive me for getting confused.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong in thinking that. But yes, this one was Renfield. Yes.
Yeah, I could only take so many notes before the podcast, and there was a lot of notes to take for this one. So yeah, so Renfield rips the face off of one of these bad guy SWAT team members, and you're just like, holy shit! He just fucking rips a guy's face off, and the guy's like screaming with the like nothing left but like just a bloody shell, and you're like, okay, that's fucking hardcore.
So. We've said this on the show before, maybe for new listeners or people who haven't tuned into every single episode. You make the categories, you send me your picks, and then I kind of give my picks. So you don't know my picks going into the show.
No.
So you could have easily picked Jenna Cannell, and I would say I would just agree. She was a great performance. The face ripper was my favorite goal because here's the thing. It was surprising because I thought I had it picked because there was a scene right before that. It's the SWAT team trying to come after Renfield in his apartment, and they're kind of coming after him and Awkwafina's character because they're all bad guys. They're all bad cops on the take of the Lobo family. And so they're trying to get out of there. And at one point, he grabs the cop's arms and rips his arms off. And I was like, holy shit. And it was full on, like, it wasn't goofy, but it was like full on Monty Python and the Holy Grail where the knight he's like, it's been a flesh wound.
Yeah.
But like he's standing there, blood squirting out of his arms, and the cop's like, oh. It's just a great moment. He rips his arms clean off. I was like, oh shit. And I thought that was it. I was like, it's over. That's my favorite gore. He ripped the dude's arms off and blood everywhere. And then like 2 seconds later, he just reaches over and just pulls the dude's face off out of nowhere. And I was like, oh my God. So that was my favorite gore because I did not see that coming. When he literally just rips his face off, I did not see that coming.
Yeah, no, there's so many incredibly gory moments. Like I think in that same fight scene, one of the guys is like half leaning over a railing and like Renfield jumps on him and like explodes his torso.
When he rips his arms off, he uses those as javelins and stabs 2 other guys in the chest. He takes
it's a gory fucking movie.
The severed arms get stabbed through 2 other people.
Golly, there is a, for lack of a better term, a Frankenstein version of this movie that is like kind of like hardcore as opposed to comedic. That would be one of the greatest like vampire movies you've ever seen because they go hard on that gore.
Yeah, they really do. Like I said, that was probably one of my biggest surprises of this movie, and I loved it. I was like, oh my gosh, I did not see this coming, and boy, did they lean hard into it. Although I will say, if I had one minor complaint, I wish it was more practical effects. You could tell a lot of.
Yeah, I mean, what are you gonna do, right?
Yeah,
It's they couldn't. I mean, it's tough to do those on top of all the other things. They were also doing a crime movie here, Damon.
yeah,
Cut
that's
them
true.
some slack.
They
They had
were,
a whole police force. They had a. I mean, geez, they were doing 6 movies in one movie.
yeah, that's true. That's very true. All right, let's talk about best kill in this movie because there are a lot of kills in this movie.
There
Uh,
are.
what was your best kill in Renfield?
It was hard to choose. It really was hard to pick, but I ultimately went with sort of the, I guess, the crescendo kill, which was that Renfield kills Teddy. Now mind you, at this point, Teddy is also a familiar. He's been granted the powers that Dracula gives you, kind of superhuman or Dracula style strength. So they have this big knockdown, drag out fight, and Renfield finally gets the kill shot on Teddy, and Teddy basically explodes from both ends, like basically like a diarrhea of blood coming out of his ass and his face. He just kind of explodes, but the way he explodes from both ends is it kind of, I know you don't play many video games, but it sort of reminded me of the later versions of Mortal Kombat. In
Okay.
the later versions of Mortal Kombat, you'll see this moment where like the death blow, it'll go to like an X-ray version of it, and it does that in this movie. It goes X-ray, and you see how he's getting broken in all different ways, and then just like gore just explodes from every orifice that Teddy has.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's also, like I said, even though I didn't really need that fight because why can't Dracula just fight for himself? But that was a good fight scene and a good. Again, I think it could have just been. Here's the thing: could have just been Teddy and Renfield. They didn't need all the henchmen in there. That was kind of like the point. Like, why do we need all the henchmen too? But again, minor complaint. So I cheated on my best kill because it was the scene we just talked about in the apartment building, and I'm just saying best kill was that entire scene because it was
Yeah, that's a
great.
great scene.
So much creativity in the kills in there, from the guy getting his arms ripped off to the guy getting his face ripped off to the guys getting stabbed with the severed arms. He kills an entire SWAT team, and it's just the entire thing is just carnage candy, and it's just so much fun. I know I'm cheating by picking that entire scene, but it was just, again, that was the scene when they really went over the top of the gore and the blood and everything, and I was like, holy crap, I can't believe I'm seeing this right now. Like, I did not see this level of gore coming, and boy did they go for it, and it was fun.
Oh yeah, it was fun. And another scene is when Dracula kills everybody at the support group.
Yeah.
Like you could have picked that one. The support group massacre was another big kill scene. There's a lot to enjoy about this movie. It's just a shame that there's almost too much to enjoy.
Yeah. You just injected a little bit too much crime saga in the middle of a really funny, goofy Dracula movie. All right, funny moments. Our favorite funny moment in this film, because this film is really funny.
It's a funny
I
movie.
I burst out laughing several times in the theater. What was your favorite funny moment in Renfield?
I'm going to own up and say that this might not actually be the funniest moment. It's just the moment that I know for sure I laughed the loudest. And early on, when Renfield is in the support group listening to other people's stories because he's trying to find his next victim. He's looking for that shithead that's abusing somebody in this group. Well, one of the women in the group is talking about her boyfriend who loves ska. And I can't begin to tell you how badly I hate the music, the genre that is 90s ska. I mean, the old.
You don't own any Less Than Jake T-shirts? Is that what you're?
I have no Less Than Jake. I have no Mighty Mighty Boss Tones. None of this awful fucking music. The 90s had great music and also some of the worst music you'll ever hear, which was the revival of ska. Now, not to get into a music history lesson, there was ska from way back in the day, from I believe the 60s and 70s in Jamaica, that's actually pretty fucking good. But then a bunch of fucking yahoos grew up listening to that music and decided, hey, why don't we make our own version of ska, which was awful. That's the version they're referencing here, the awful 90s ska. And everybody in the support group's like, that's the music with like a lot of horns in it or something? It's like 90% horn. I was just laughing my ass off because I fucking hate it. I also live in San Diego, which adopted Sublime for some reason, which to me is one of the worst bands that has ever existed, ever, period. also a ska band, also kind of like a reggae ska band. So I'm laughing my ass off. Everybody else in the theater was quiet because I think everybody in San Diego likes ska. So it just hit me on a different level. I think there are funnier moments in this movie, but I could not stop laughing because the writers of this movie understood that ska is one of the shittiest forms of music ever made.
It injected a little bit. I laughed at that too. I don't hate ska that much, but I
Oh,
don't
I hate
I'm
it.
like a big ska person. I actually do like a couple Mighty Mighty Boston songs.
Look at you,
Um,
Damon.
we definitely ride in the same car when it comes to
Sublime.
when it comes to Sublime. Yeah, when it comes to that band, we are 100% on the same page there. Um, but that scene was really funny. It felt like in that moment, like they're just like, we're gonna inject a scene from High Fidelity into this movie.
I love
And I
High
was like,
Fidelity.
I love High Fidelity. I was like, I worked at a music store for 7 years. That was my college job. Even after college, I worked at a music store. So like, I was those people. I loved that scene. It was hilarious, and because the girl ends up like she's like ripping on ska, and someone rips on ska, and then she like defends ska. It was really funny. It's like, is that the shitty music with 90% horns? You don't understand it, and I can't believe I said that.
Yeah, yeah. All the toxicity of dating someone who loves ska.
Yeah, it was really funny. No, it was a good scene. That was, and it was actually I was with you on that. It was really unexpectedly funny, and again, felt like a little High Fidelity being injected into another genre being injected into the film. And it's just one joke. It's the running gag in the film, which again, even the language, I was like, God, they really went for the language here. Like, there's no pulling the punches. A whole lot of f bombs. But there's a great scene where they have Renfield and Rebecca cornered, and she finds out that not only are the Lobos after her, but her entire police department is on the take, and they are basically working for the Lobo family. And so they surround her and they arrest Renfield. They're basically just trying to like get her to sort of basically join the team, right? Join the team with us. And so her direct commanding officer is like, Rebecca, listen, if you come over to our side, you can have a promotion, you'll rise up the ranks, you get better pay, advancement in your job, and you can even have the parking spot. You can have Kyle's parking spot, and Kyle is another like detective, higher ranking detective in the police force than Rebecca. We meet him early on. He's kind of a goof, and she loves to say, "Fuck you, Kyle." So Kyle's standing next to the cop, and he's like, "You can have a promotion, you can have better money, and you can have a parking spot. You can have Kyle's parking spot." And Kyle goes, "Hey," and he goes, "Fuck you, Kyle." And Kyle goes, "Congratulations on your promotion," and I fucking lost it. I cried laughing when he's just like, when he says, "Fuck you, Kyle," and Kyle goes, "Congrats on your promotion." I cried laughing. I don't know why it was that struck me so funny about that.
Yeah.
But just his reaction to me like, "Congrats on your promotion." I lost it.
I loved the toxic relationship that like the whole police force had with each other.
Oh, I know.
Because like I thought it was going to be much briefer. I didn't think it was going to be a whole saga, but like that first initial like Rebecca like kind of walking through the bullpen at the police station, and everybody kind of hates each other and it's like on each other's like just can't over everybody's shit. And then she was kind of bitching about like everybody should like get along better, and Kyle says something, she goes, "Fuck you, Kyle." It's like so fucking funny. And little did I know that was going to be one of many "fuck you, Kyles" that would totally work in this movie.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. That scene just hit different when he said that. I literally burst out laughing in the theater. I just started cracking up. Just something about the delivery of that. And Kyle became like the beating boy, and it was just so funny. when he's just like, "Hey," and he's like, "Fuck you, Kyle." It cracked me up. And again, there's a lot of funny moments in this film. It is a really funny movie. Like, there are a lot of, again, the scene with Teddy confessing was hilarious. Him throwing the cocaine at the cop was like just bursting the cop's face with the big
Just watching
cocaine.
That image is so fucking funny. Yeah, no, there's plenty to laugh at in this movie. There's a ton of funny moments. I mean, we just picked a couple that struck us funny. There's plenty of moments to laugh in this movie.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about our next category, which is remake, sequel, or leave it alone. This category, we basically take this movie and we say, should we remake it? Should we sequelize it? Or should we leave it alone as is? So, Patrick, when it comes to Renfield, remake, sequel, or leave it alone?
I have a strange feeling that you and I are going to pick the exact same thing, which is remake. 100% this needs to be remade. and it needs to be remade with Nicolas Cage as Dracula. And we've kind of sprinkled it throughout the podcast. I want a serious dark version of this movie. Keep Nicholas Hoult, keep Dracula, or keep Nicolas Cage as Dracula. Sorry to everybody else, because I think they did a great job. They were good for the comedy version. That's the comedy version over there. Sorry, everybody, you got to go. But we're keeping Nicholas Hoult. We're keeping Nicolas Cage. We're keeping the abandoned hospital in New Orleans. And we're going straight hardcore, scary horror and letting Nicolas Cage explore that side of it. I want that so bad because he was onto something. We're not going to get it now because we just did it. But like what he was up to could have been so sinister and so nasty. And the idea that like when you first meet him, he's kind of a charred shell of himself and he's trying to regain his power. And seeing him in the shadows and all that shit, like there's plenty to do in a chilling hardcore version of this movie. I just want to see it.
Yeah, so 100% that's the remake I'd like to see as well. We've already talked about it a lot, but I'll go in a slightly different direction just to kind of give a different take on it. Remake is the answer. And again, if you want to leave it a horror comedy, great. Just remake this and eliminate the weird subplot. That's if you want to remake it in a way that you could do this again, do it that way. Just remake it without the weird subplot because everything else about this film, the whole codependency, toxic relationship, the support group stuff, even again, the Aquafina character isn't the problem. It's all the other stuff you inject with the crime family and avenging her father and all this weird like stuff that doesn't really belong in this film. Dump that and increase like again the idea I had earlier where it's Dracula who killed her father. If you want to inject the father storyline, make that the father storyline. That way it ties all together. Where Dracula killed her father, and that's one of the innocents he killed or whatever. Make that the subplot. Don't make it about this weird crime family that just gets injected in there, and it just feels like it feels like every time you're with the crime family, you're in a different movie.
Yeah.
And that I would just change. So again, your version's the one I want. But if I'm going to just keep this film and just say remake it with that. It can still be this funny and this well done. Just eliminate that weird underlying criminal storyline that just took away from the really fun parts of this movie.
Yeah, and you could even keep her sister, which I believe was Kate. Keep her sister in there, and that's the toxic relationship that she's in. And she's sort of maybe she quit the force, and so her and Renfield meet at this support group thing for toxic relationships, and then they start to blossom into something fun, and then she finds out that one of the innocents that has helped Dracula regain his power was her dad, and that would fuck up her whole relationship with Renfield. Like it's a great twist to every movie has to have that oh shit moment. That oh shit moment in that movie would be great because you go, oh wow, like how can they rectify that and still be good for each other? There's no way, right? How do you make that make sense? And so that would be the good problem for that movie. And you'd still have all the fun and the funniness that everybody brought to this movie. You could keep everybody in the movie just the way you say. It's just yeah, I'm sorry. I mean, I think Ben Schwartz would probably have to go. I mean, if he's the one casualty of that version, which is a shame because I think he did great. Or maybe you find another way to use him, but geez, the whole crime saga part of this thing needs to go.
Yeah. Even though there were, like I said, the cocaine in the face, there were funny moments, but the storyline itself took away from the film.
It did.
Yeah. So you're right. We did have the same answer. And by the way, you had the correct answer. I want the really horror Nicolas Cage Dracula movie.
It'd be so good.
2 categories left. We're going to get back to Dracula in a second with our favorite film or TV version of Dracula. But right now, we're going to talk about can we survive this horror film? So this is a newer category for people who maybe haven't heard this one before. This is the category where Patrick and I debate whether we could actually survive Renfield. So Patrick, inject yourself into Renfield, not in the crime family. Would you survive this film?
So I'm in this horror comedy with all these people, and Dracula pops up and Renfield pops up. I'm definitely surviving. You know why? Nobody in this movie seemed to know how to fight a vampire. Like nobody. I'll be like, guys, we go over to Home Depot right now. We buy a stack of wooden stakes for a fence. We're good to go. we're gonna win this one. In fact, he's gonna be very distracted with this whole side story of cops and robbers and drug dealers and all that shit. That I'm just gonna come right behind him and stake Dracula right through the motherfucking heart. Game over. I survived. And by the way, Renfield will be like, hey, cool, thanks for helping me out. So yeah, it's like nobody in this movie had any idea how to deal with a vampire. I mean, like, wasn't it like shocking that like it seemed like no one knew what to do?
They don't bring it until the very end when Renfield decides that he's going to go hunt for Dracula. And he's like, we need wooden stakes, we need holy water, and you're kind of like, why didn't we think about this like an hour and a half ago? Because you're just now remembering that like there are ways to kill Dracula. Besides sunlight, the sunlight was the only one they really introduced at the very beginning of the film. Yeah. So yeah, obviously, committing to the role, obviously, Nicolas Cage really lost himself in Dracula. Nicholas Hoult was actually eating bugs to transform into Renfield. Good for him, eating salt and vinegar flavored crickets, I believe, is what he was actually eating.
Okay.
Which sounds rather interesting.
He definitely didn't need to do that for any reason whatsoever.
No, he did eat gummy worms for the worms in the film, by the way. He did eat gummy worms, but for some reason they decided to use real bugs for the bugs he was eating. So if you're putting me in that role, no, I would not survive because I ain't eating insects. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be Renfield. I am not eating bugs. I'm sorry, I'm not turning into Bear Grylls. Not going to do it. But I'm with you. I would survive this film because I'm not the jackass who wouldn't know how to kill Dracula. Pretty well documented. Now, I will give them credit. There's a really funny moment at the end of the film when they finally kill Dracula, and Renfield's like, I really don't know what actually kills him, so they chop him up, they put him into little concrete cubes, and they put it and they bury it in the ground. They're like, I don't know, maybe he'll come back one day, but it's going to take him a long time to get there. It's kind of funny because they're like, we really have no idea will this actually kill him or not. That was actually pretty funny. But in the general sense of vampires, yeah, I feel pretty confident about that. I feel pretty confident that I could grab some wooden stakes and Lost Boys it up a little bit.
Yeah. Come on. I mean, we were raised on the Frog Brothers. We know how to do this shit.
Yeah, and those were like tweens. They were like 13 years old. Come on now, yeah. We got some skills now.
Full grown adult here. I got this whole fucking vampire thing figured out.
If you go back quite a while ago to me and Patrick filleting Lost Boys in one of our favorite episodes, my one complaint about that movie was I was like, it's a little kind of. It's kind of off-putting that the badass centuries-old vampires or 100-years-old vampires get taken down by some tweens. I was like, you kind of want to be a little more badass. Like, you kind of want David to be a little bit more badass than the guy who gets killed by some antlers. But again, minor complaint. If that's the
did he get killed by those antlers? We don't know.
If that's the saga we're writing here, though, I think we would be good against Dracula.
I think so.
All right, so going back to our first category that I mentioned that I didn't give you any prep work for, we're circling back now. Patrick, what is your favorite performance on screen of Dracula, film or television? Dracula, not vampire.
Dracula. Now, I know what the answer is. The problem is I don't know the guy's name, but I will tell you this, and I'll look it up as I tell you. There's no better portrayal of Dracula ever than in The Monster Squad.
Okay. Did you read my mind?
No. Because it's because it's the right answer.
This was my answer. I've had this in my head.
There's no other answer. I'm sorry, world. Everybody's gonna. Okay, I found him. Duncan Rager. I don't know if I'm saying his name right.
Duncan Rager, yes.
Duncan Rager played Count Dracula in The Monster Squad. And if you have not seen The Monster Squad, when this episode ends, and it will end very shortly here, it is required to listen to this podcast. You are required to go watch The Monster Squad and witness the best portrayal of Dracula there has ever been. Ever. Okay, and a lot of people are going to go, that's Gary Oldman and Bram Stoker. I like that movie. I actually like Bram Stoker's Dracula, and I thought Gary Oldman did a great job. You want this Dracula. The Monster Squad Dracula is the Dracula you always wanted. It's classic. He's villainous. He's got a great look. And he's sinister. You don't like him, but he's weirdly charismatic. It's everything Dracula should ever be is in The Monster Squad.
Yeah. So this was my answer. I thought I was going to pull a rabbit out of the hat here and surprise you with this one.
Fuck no, Damon.
This is my favorite Dracula of all time. He is so good. There's some great moments in this film, like when he throws the dynamite in there, it says "meeting adjourned."
Yeah.
Oh, he has a great voice. Also, truly terrifying moment later in the film when he picks up Phoebe and he says, "Give me the amulet, you bitch."
Oh my God.
It's like a little like 8-year-old girl, like 6-year-old girl. And you're like,
He grabs an 8-year-old girl by the cheeks, like he grabs her face and pulls her up by her face.
Yeah.
Like that's sinister. It's not nice in any way.
Give me the amulet, you bitch.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's
and
so
she
hardcore.
screams because she should scream. And he's like, and he like hisses in her face with the vampire teeth. He looks, to say, I know you said you're not like way big into the 1939 version, and neither am I necessarily, but I think we all associate ourselves with the imagery that Bela Lugosi had, and Christopher Lee, it's very similar imagery. He takes on that look in the Monster Squad. It's very classic Dracula, but there's just something about the way he filled out the role. It had a very different feel to it. That almost I would say grounded it, if that's the weird way to say. Like those movies they sort of live in this weird fuzzy Hollywood cinematic like tapestry, and this felt like a Count Dracula that could walk the streets, still be like that, still like anyone could easily identify that is Dracula walking down the street. I know 100% that's Dracula because he's very recognizable. But he just, something about it was like, that's a Dracula I don't want to fuck with.
Yeah, he was terrifying in that. When I was a kid and I saw Monster Squad, I was like, that is a terrifying, terrifying Dracula. So yeah, Christopher Lee is my other one. I love Christopher Lee and all the Hammer horror films. But yeah, I thought I was going to pull a rabbit out of the hat with that one, but I'm glad we agreed. Nah. I absolutely adore that version of Dracula.
No better version. Easily, hands down.
Love it. Overall, as we said, so our last category, as we always say on this film, on this podcast, I should say, is it scary? Patrick, it's a horror comedy. It's not scary. It's not scary. I will say there are some intimidating moments from Nicolas Cage. He does really well, fleeting but good moments. Great gore. If you're into gore, that'll get you. But it's not scary. But it's not meant to be scary. So.
Yeah, I mean, some people, by the way, hate gore, even though they're horror fans. Like, if gore freaks you out, there's a lot of gore in this movie.
Yeah,
but it's not a scary movie.
Yeah, surprisingly a lot of gore in this movie. But yeah, it's not a scary movie. But it's a good horror comedy. Like I said, if you just dump that one part of the movie that really doesn't fit and doesn't belong here, was it the old Sesame Street game? One of these things is not like the other. That's what this is. The one thing in this movie, you're like, why did they inject a weird like crime saga in the middle of this?
Why is Copland also in this movie?
Yeah, why is this happening? Eliminate that, and it's a pretty brilliant movie, and it's pretty funny. And give me, like I said, give me 20, 30 minutes more of Nicolas Cage as Dracula and less of the weird Lobo crime family saga. But overall, again, still really enjoyable and laugh out loud funny at moments.
Absolutely, 100%.
All right, folks, that's our episode for this week. I'll go ahead and tease our next episode because we are going back to back with great new horror. Next week, it's a big one. Evil Dead Rise drops in theaters. The Evil Dead franchise. We've actually not touched the Evil Dead franchise on this podcast. 130 some odd episodes in, we haven't actually touched that franchise yet. Our first one will be next week as we talk about Evil Dead Rise, the new Evil Dead film. First Evil Dead film totally detached from the original since Army of Darkness, because Fede Alvarez's was based on the original Evil Dead. This is totally separate. So first new Evil Dead film of this era. I know there was Ash vs. Evil Dead, the TV show, but totally separate from that. First one in a long time. So we will have Evil Dead Rise next week. Make sure you tune in each and every week to Rewind the Living Dead. Check us out on all your favorite podcast platforms. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio. You can always find us over on my website at nerdcoremovement.com. And please, 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 go subscribe to our new YouTube channel. You don't necessarily have to look at us, although you can look at us because there is video over there. Just find youtube.com/Rewind of the Living Dead. Subscribe, like our videos. We're dropping them each and every week on there now. So please go subscribe to the YouTube channel as we continue to build that format for the podcast. You got questions, comments, movies you'd like us to review, hit us up anytime. You can send us an email at rotlivingdead@gmail.com. That's rot. livingdead@gmail.com. And you can also hit us up on all of our social media platforms. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Like those pages, follow those pages, and send us messages. If you got movies you want us to review or a comment you have about the film we just reviewed, please hit us up anytime. You can also find us on our own personal social media channels. I am at Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
And want to say a big thank you, as always, for everyone tuning in. We'll be back next week with Evil Dead Rise, so stay tuned for that. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you then.
Peace.